Hey, welcome to Horns Up. And with this episode, we're beginning a month of doom on the podcast. We didn't plan this, but coincidentally, I'm borrowing your words, our lives are just doomed.
Yeah, man. I mean, it's just crazy how it all worked out. And I guess it coincides also with just like the monsoons in India, right? And I kind of hate it. And I've made my displeasure well known about the monsoons. And
Fucking man.
So sitting in, and now that it's kind of worse in a way, when you're cooped up. But you want to like tune in and I don't know, whatever, man, whatever is your way of zoning. Yeah,
Exactly. Of course. And that too in the year 2020, which just happens to be the worst fucking year ever. Anyways,
True.
coming back to regular programming then, we are starting off with Temple of Void, a band whose album, The World That Was one of my top 5 picks for the first half of 2020, and I raved a lot about it, and which is why we decided to get them. This one's also special because for the first time, I think, we have almost the whole band. We actually have 3 members of the band with us at the same time. So let's just dive in straight to the chat. Here's Temple of Void.
And now Horns Up is talking to 3 members of Temple of Void. Hi guys.
Hello.
Can we do a quick round of introductions, because at the end of the day, this is audio only. So I'd like everyone here to introduce themselves so that our listeners can match their voices. And while introducing yourselves, tell us what role you play in the band and pick one adjective that defines Temple of Void. No repeats.
Oh boy.
You guys want to do this in alphabetical order?
Okay,
I'll go
sure.
first. I'm Mike. I'm the vocalist. You want an adjective for Temple of Void?
Yep.
I would say on task. Especially in just with everything going on with all that, I got to give it up. Props to Alex for always keeping busy and always getting stuff, and Brent doing all the mail order, and everybody just doing what they can to keep the ball rolling since we can't really play live.
I'm Don. I play guitar, and one adjective. I'll take the easy way out and say heavy.
Nice.
Nice.
All right, this is Alex. I play guitar in Temple of Void, and the adjective the first word that came to my mind was crushing.
Ooh.
So,
okay.
Yeah.
Crushing,
I
heavy,
think
and on task.
there you go.
We can put that on
There
the
you
shirt,
go.
right?
Yeah, it's like
There
that's
you
our
go.
next.
How's that a back?
Yeah.
On
Yeah. You can send us a check later.
crushing heavy on task.
All right. It's fabulous to talk with the 3 of you. So let's start off by talking a little bit about the band itself. You guys define yourselves as a death doom band. So allow me to pull your leg a little bit here. What's the ideal ratio of death to doom for Temple of Void? Like, is it 50-50? Is it 70-30, 20-80? Is it more deathy doom or is it more doomy death?
Depends on the album, I guess.
Yeah, I think that's what's so cool about it from our perspective is that we can't really answer that. We have to be wishy-washy with that response because it depends on what we're feeling at any given moment. And as long as it's got some component of death and some component of doom, then that's the right ratio, whatever that may be. Whether it's 20-80, 80-20, 50-50, as long as there's both of that. And maybe it's 4-20, and then there's some other shit in there that you're not considering from the death and the doom. Because very little of what we do is just death, just doom. There's typically some other components thrown in the mix. So
Yeah. Okay.
So we kind of wriggled our way out of that answer.
Like I said, with the
Smartly
album stuff,
played. Smartly played.
Yeah, I was gonna say with the album stuff, it really depends on like, because the first one definitely like overall went more towards doom. The second one, Lords of Death, was clearly more in like the death metal realm, and then the last one that we had is kind of more like that 50-50, like you said. It's sort of in between there.
So who in the band brings, the death part, and who brings the doom?
We're also polite that none of us want to like be the first person to speak.
Well, I think that's probably like a 50-50 or some kind of a ratio between like riffs and stuff like that, And it's I don't know, it's just kind of, at least for me, like when I'm like coming up with riffs or ideas and whatnot, it's just whatever falls out of me that I think sounds cool or not, and I present to the band. And usually I've kind of found with with when an idea starts and then when it gets filtered in, into the band, all together, like it comes out sounding differently than, when it was first conceived a lot of the time too.
We all Mike brings like 100% death with his vocals,
Yeah.
Well,
so,
what about the Queens?
Yeah, I mean, maybe nothing's as black and white as saying it 100%, but he contributes so much to the death aspect. And for me, like when I write guitar, I like to, like, I was listening to Deicide today, like Once Upon the Cross, and just like when I was working out, and I'm just thinking, man, this is such an awesome blueprint for, like, if I just had to, like, one kind of death metal record on a desert island, like, you can make a strong argument for Once Upon the Cross as far as, like, the kind of riffs that I like to play. So that influences me when I'm writing the death stuff. And then I don't feel like I write a ton of doom anymore as much as I write some of the more weirder stuff, quote unquote. But then we have had a couple stuff recently that's kind of that hum influence, like that. I know, Don, you're not really digging Inlet, but like I feel like, I mean, that's doomy, but I feel like that's where my, like, the doom is like a little bit different now than maybe where it was, at least from my perspective when I bring it.
Okay.
It's like alternative doom.
Yeah.
It's almost like everybody kind of provides a little bit of a safeguard to kind of keep it still rooted in like the death doom sort of realm, because like Alex said, like he'll kind of take things and he'll incorporate influences, or like Don even, it's like take influences that may not traditionally be in that death doom, that like, whatever it was, like 40-20 plus like odd percentages of other things that we were saying before. So it's like even with the world that was, like, it's mostly death vocals aside from like the one main track on it, Leave the Light Behind, and a lot of that is because there's a lot of other things going on where, like, riff wise with Don and Al writing, so it's like that kind of roots it back into the death metal. Like Jason's not really like a typical death metal drummer, so like sometimes you need that to kind of root it back in there, because there will be like a beat that isn't always typical, I mean, for like somebody like, let's say that, relies heavily on stuff like double kicks and, a lot of like traditional, Cannibal Corpse style drum beats and things like that, that we typically associate with like death metal. We don't really typically use things like blasting and things like that. So like vocals and riffs kind of provide that balance, and it works as like checks and balances. So we're not going too far off into left field, I think.
Okay. So allow me to ask you guys this: did you guys always want to be a death doom band? I mean, what were the early jams like? How did you guys arrive at this kind of a sound?
To me, I was just actually talking about this in an interview, in a written interview the other day. I used to work out with Eric, the original guitarist, and when we were kind of talking about what we wanted to do, we both leaned towards doom as like the primary genre that we wanted to bring into the mix. And I've always wanted to have like a Paradise Lost icon era band. And so he dug Paradise Lost, I dug Paradise Lost, and we're just looking at Detroit and we're just thinking, like, there isn't a death doom representation in Detroit. We felt that we could bring something to the table that didn't exist. So when we started it, we were bringing in like, Jason, Brent, Mike, Eric, myself. You're feeling each other out. Like Brent and I have played together in bands for like 20 years, but the rest of the guys never played in a band with, you know. So it was feeling things out. The first track we ever wrote, Ward of Crom, we realized that wasn't the direction we wanted to go in. But the second track was Exanimate Gaze, and I feel like Exanimate Gaze for us kind of crystallized what I perceive to be like the genesis of Temple of Void as we know it today, as far as like the death metal riffing in that track, the spaciness, and at the end, the doominess of the chorus. It kind of had all of that stuff that for me is like a quintessential Temple of Void track. So I think once we did that, it was like, okay, that's our laser focus, and we can kind of shift and shimmy as we want over the years, but that was definitely, for me, the blueprint track for moving forward. Mike, I mean, you were there at the very beginning. What do you think?
Well, I mean, when I came in, because I know out of that original lineup, I was like the last guy that kind of came in, and you guys kind of contacted me, like, because I kind of knew Eric through like some other stuff, and kind of hit me up because I was doing the Acid Witch thing and whatnot. And then I came in, and it was like you guys had, it was like the 3 songs, and there was like Ward of Crom, and actually they didn't even have titles at the time, but it was like, yeah, they had like working titles, but it was like Ward of Crom, Exanimate Gaze, and Beyond the Ultimate. And Beyond the Ultimate and Exanimate Gaze were more unified and everything, and that's why it makes sense that Ward of Crom was the first one. I think I don't know, there really isn't much more that I could add to it. I think that you pretty much nailed how it was. It kind of started off, you guys were kind of feeling each other out, and then I kind of came into the mix, and it all sort of just kind of coalesced together as more like a death doom thing, more than just like a emphasis on like a heavy doom with some like deathier influences. Because I know you guys had tried a couple other people out prior to me, and you were, you know, I mean, you were looking for something more death metal vocals, more, you know.
Yeah, I was. Yeah, like Eric did more of like a Candlemass kind of traditional. Like he was thinking Trouble, Candlemass, that kind of thing, and I was thinking, I was thinking death metal. And then when he called Mike up and Mike provided those vocals, it was like, fuck, yeah, dude.
Now it's coming together.
I didn't even. I just kind of was like, oh, whatever. I've never done vocals. Sure, I'll try it. You know.
Okay, Don, what about you? I mean, you're coming in at the time when, or you came in at a time when Temple of Void was already up and running. What were your first impressions of the band as such when you heard them? And did you, at that time, know that you would want to be a part of this?
Wow. Yes. I'll go back, you know, and further with that. I've known Alex and Brent for about 20 years as well. I played with Brent in a band years and years ago. And I think Mike and I have probably we talked about this before. I think we've probably crossed paths plenty of times over the years, and you know.
Oh yeah, I've seen this old band play a bunch of times, being in shows before I was even really playing in bands and stuff. So. Yeah,
and the band that I was in prior to was called Writhing, and we actually played the first Temple of Void show that ever took place. So I kind of feel like everything's kind of come, you know, full circle a little bit, and you know, definitely like when I was seeing Temple of Void play live, it was, you know, one of my thoughts was like I wish I wrote some of these riffs, you know, and you know, now I get to play them, so it kind of works out. It works out pretty well for me. But it's I think the 5 of us, I think we all work really, really well together. I feel like we do. I mean, I feel like, you know, the 4 of them prior to me coming in worked really, really well together. And I just try to add what I can to the mix, you know, while still trying to keep everything rooted with, you know, what the original intentions were with the band. You know, it's been, you know, the experience has been really, really good.
Now that you've told us all about this, what's your songwriting process like now? I mean, what comes first, the riff or music, the song theme idea, or the lyrics?
Don, we need to schedule some more time to hang out and write more riffs.
Yeah.
Like right now, we've had a COVID process where Don and I are just writing independently and then throwing a whole bunch of riffs into a Dropbox folder. And then every couple weeks, Don comes to my house. We start jamming on them together. We write stuff, and then we bring it to the band. And at no point do we ever bring a whole song. Like, that's never happened in 7 years, I don't think. We bring the genesis, we bring some sort of seed that we plant, and then it goes through umpteen iterations and changes and transmogrifications as everyone in the band has a different idea and input. And we write fast riffs that get played slow. You know, like, we don't know what's going to happen once we bring it to the band. And that's where, like, the magic happens. Is like, Brent doesn't have to write a riff. He contributes, you know, with his verbal ideas, then we can kind of manifest that as we're jamming together. And, you know, and then Jason just has such a different idea from drumming that it takes a village in this case.
I really like that because, you know, at the end of the day, for most, the idealistic version of every band is supposed to be that it's a collaborative effort by everyone and not just one person's music that is being played by other people because that one person cannot play each and every instrument. Well, unless you're like Putrid Pile or someone. So, yeah. Okay, cool. So, let's talk about The World That Was. And yes, this was an album that our listeners would have heard of before because I included it as part of my top 5 albums to be released in 2020 till the end of June 2020. Yeah, you've received similar accolades and lots of positive vibes from listeners across the world, right? Why do you guys think this album has resonated with your listeners?
I think it's a very honest record that we made. You know, I don't. It's not a contrived like piece of music that we set out to make. We came in with riffs and we all worked together and made something, you know, natural and organically, you know, and you know, the process was as such too. You know, I think maybe part of it has to do with, you know, with the current state of things and, you know, the time that the album was released, and, you know, maybe that was, you know, it was something that, you know, people needed or they were looking for, and, you know, we were able to give that to them. And you know, I think we're all pretty. I think maybe I can speak for everyone. I say we're all pretty, you know, overwhelmed with the amount of positive response that has come, you know, from the release of the album.
Yeah, I mean, I'm in agreement with you, Don. I mean, the title and all that sort of stuff is coincidentally perfect, just with everything that happened. Because I mean, who wants it? But I mostly agree with the fact that it's an honest album. I think that kind of, it's worn on its sleeve. I think that does shine through. I know, at least for me, lyrically, it was a bit different for me, and I will say that I came pretty honestly with the lyrics as far as that goes. And I know the riffs and everything's just really sincere about it overall. I think from our own personal standpoint, like, it's definitely a record that we're all pretty proud of.
And I think if we're getting back to adjectives, if I may, I think it's immersive in a way that resonates with people from like the artwork perspective, like the artwork through this atmosphere, through the songs, through the lyrics. Like, I think it's a very cohesive and well thought out record from an immersion perspective. It feels a bit three-dimensional, definitely. And people pick up on that. So I think that's our intent, but it's great when you hear people picking up on that and, you know, and then spitting that back at you. So
I think too, like, maybe another smaller component of it is, you know, the album's got 6 songs and most of them were pretty lengthy, but, you know, from the times that I've listened to the record myself, you know, it's 36, 38 minutes, you know, whatever it is, it comes and goes pretty quick. I mean, there's really no point where I feel like there's like any kind of like a lag in the record. Like, it's, you know, you hit play on track 1 and, you know, it's kind of like, before you know it, like, title track is, you know, over and done, and it's, you know, I mean, that's, you know, that's damn near a 10-minute song, but it doesn't, I don't feel like the songs feel as long as they are in relation to what the timing says, next to the title.
I'm with you, Don. I agree. I think like The World That Was, it's a 10-minute song because it needed to be a 10-minute song, not because it was forced to be a 10-minute song. And I think that's why it carries you through. And when it's done, you're like, oh, it doesn't really feel like 10 minutes. Kind of with the album. The album does feel like a quick listen because it is a very cohesive journey from like start. You've got like the horror-based song that's very like reminiscent of the previous two albums. And then it kind of just gradually changes pace into just kind of a whole different animal, and you're kind of exposed to a little bit of new influence and a little bit of curveballs here and there, and then by the time it's done, you got the sample, it just kind of sucks you into nothingness, and then you got to start all over again.
Yeah, I mean, it is definitely it's a bit of a journey and a bit of an adventure, like you said, Mike, with the way like some of the songs kind of move around and ebb and flow and stuff like that.
Okay. In a previous interview, you guys have said that you gained a lot of new fans thanks to The World That Was. Where are these new fans coming from? Are you guys doing any sort of like, data mining or insight mining or something of that sort to find out where people are coming from? Where are you getting the new listens from? What kind of fans are coming to you guys?
Yeah, I think it's just having a broader push, like getting a lot more, like, I mean, Decibel put a flexi of ours out. I mean, there's just, it's a lot of new things that we didn't get on the previous releases. I feel like we got a little bit more PR on the album. I think that kind of ties into it. And then from there, I mean, you just see it gradually. I mean, we could see an influx in things like just with people ordering stuff directly from us through like Bandcamp, I mean, feedback from, Shadow Kingdom, things like that.
So I've got the Apple app that I can look at data to see where people are listening to the album from, and like we follow, like we have the apps for Bandcamp and for Apple and stuff like that. So we can see how our record is doing relative compared to prior records, for instance, and who's streaming it and like where they're streaming it from. And then, like, you look at, like, the top countries, and it's, like, the United States, Canada, UK, Germany, like, expected stuff.
Yeah, the expected stuff.
It's cool to scroll down to the bottom and go, holy shit, Malawi, Kenya, Azerbaijan, Angola, Nepal, Algeria, Croatia, like, Ghana. And it's like, god damn, someone in Ghana's listening to Temple of Void? Like, that's so freaking cool, And so to answer your question, like it's coming from, like we can quantify it that it's coming from Apple. We know it's coming from Spotify. We know it's coming from Bandcamp. Just the way that these streaming services like democratize our music, it allows people on all corners of the globe to check us out, which is like really cool.
Again, this is based on our listening. Is that this album seems a lot more doomy than deathy. And it's a lot more melodic and melancholic. Do you guys think so? And was there any intention before you started work on this album that this is the sound that you wanted to achieve?
I'd agree with the statement. I definitely think that it's a lot more melodic. I think we even said before in a thing, an interview somewhere where there was, I think, more of an emphasis on like memorable songwriting. I think that was kind of a main thing going into this, but I mean, you're going to want to probably ask the riff writers for the most part,
I don't know if we necessarily, I don't, at least not in my head. I didn't set out to say, okay, we gotta, the album's got to sound like this, or, it's got to, kind of like what I said earlier, like everything was pretty, natural and organic, like the way, the way the songs kind of came together. Some of, a couple of them came together a little quicker than others, but, something like the title track, like, Alex and I started on that when we were rehearsing it in my house for a time. And, we just both plugged in our amps and turned everything on. And we were both just kind of, getting sounds, before we were going to start playing some songs, and we both were like down towards like the bottom of the neck on our guitars, and we both hit like separate notes that just kind of worked together, and that was kind of how that thing started. And then that song itself just kind of, I think, took on a life of its own. And it wasn't, like kind of like Mike said, like it needed to be 10 minutes, but I don't think it wasn't set out when we hit those first 2 notes, like, yeah, we're going to write a huge long song. But that was, that was kind of the way that it went. I feel like, yeah, there's definitely, and I agree with the statement too, that there's, it is a little more melodic and, there's definitely some melancholy in there too, for sure. Like, I think there's some passages here and there where there's kind of like a general like uneasiness in some spots where like there's a little bit of like discomfort, like in the sounds and the tones and stuff that's going on. And it's more, and I guess that more kind of revolves around atmosphere altogether.
Yeah, and I think because The World That Was the first song that we wrote, it kind of exemplifies the fact that there was no premeditation, because you would think if that was the first song, then, okay, we're going to write an album that has like 4 10-minute long songs. But like, that's not the case at all. It just happened to be that was the first one. That's what came out first. And as we start working on additional songs, it kind of comes full circle back to your question about the ratio of death to doom. So I don't think we ever set out to, I know we don't set out to say this album's going to be like, going to go in this direction, that direction. But as each song evolves, then we have to look back and go, how are these songs evolving? Are they all doomy? Well, okay, we got to check ourselves and make sure that we inject some death into the next stuff. So it kind of builds upon itself as we write each song, but there's no grand scheme. And the thing that I always like to push is thinking of the album in totality. Like, I don't care if we write like a 4-minute, death metal banger with 0 doom in it. I don't care if we write an 8-minute doom song. I only care about like how it fits in with the full 40-minute record, because that's just like, it's going to ebb and flow, and sometimes a whole song is ebbing, sometimes a whole song is flowing, sometimes the song is just going up and down like The World That Was in different things. So I look at it more as they're chapters in a book. And as long as all the chapters, some are going to be more boring, like in a book. And like, I'm not saying our songs are boring, but like they have different, there's action sequences,
Yep.
there's different sequences in a book, and that's how our albums should be. And you don't judge it by any one chapter, just like we don't judge it by any one song, I would say.
I love the fact that you guys are thinking of this as thinking of the output as an entire album. And I must say, one of the biggest things that resonated for me with The World That Was the pacing of this entire album. I mean, if this is a very weird reference, but I think it was like Goldilocks and the 3 bowls of porridges as such. It's not too fast, it's not too slow, but it's just right. Was that a conscious decision as such, that we have to keep the pace not mind-blowingly explosive and not mind-numbingly funerally of sorts?
I don't think any of us like listening to a whole lot of stuff that's like ultra slow. I know, like, I can speak for Brent and myself that we like very little funeral doom. It's like a couple bands, but I don't want to listen to a whole. I don't want to do a whole record that sounds like that.
Yeah, I like funeral doom, but I don't think that I could be like exclusive. I mean, just from being like a vocalist standpoint, like there's already a lot of points where there's large instrumental breaks. You know what I mean? Like with funeral doom, it would just, as far as for me and even my attention span. But I do like that stuff. But yeah, it's not something I think that we want to incorporate to that extremity. By being a death doom band, you're not so polar in one side as you are the other. You kind of keep it relatively in the middle, but you ebb and flow sort of right where that baseline is.
Yeah, I think there's sometimes when I think like as far as like with Temple of Void, like to me like Temple of Void is like a slow band. Like that's like Mike said, it's not like there's not like a bunch of double bass and blast beats at 250 BPM or anything like that. But I think like overall like tempo within the band is pretty important. So like it's just for the way that like certain parts like need to be like slowed down a little bit just so you get like more like a, you know, so you have more of like a feel to it. And like that's kind of what I look for with the riffs, is for all of them to have, you know, some kind of a feel where you can still, even if they're faster, you can still like move to them and get into them and find like a pace or a groove that, you know, that sits in with them.
And one of the important things, a lesson, kind of like a lesson that we learned was, of Terror and the Supernatural was, you know, on the doomier side, and we enjoy listening to it, but we recognize playing live that when we had to cut songs, we would cut the doomier songs first, and we would play the more mid-tempo or more death metal oriented songs.
Okay.
Because live, that's what it's all about. I mean, we want that energy. We don't want to be playing plodding stuff. We might want to listen to that, but when you translate that to the stage, we don't want to just be playing these big open chords and this like doomy stuff. We want to headbang. We want to play shit that sounds like Asphyx. So that's where Lords of Death kind of swung it. We did have a conscious idea that we wanted to write stuff that we could play live and enjoy from an energy perspective. And then I think we managed to hit the sweet spot in the world that was, where we learned that lesson about what works well live, but we're also able to incorporate doom in such a fashion that it translates. When we have to test this theory because we haven't played a show because of COVID. But I think the theory is that we can play with the energy of death metal, but play with like the doominess, you know, that we wanted to capture. And so hopefully we can get that energetic doom for a little while. Maybe that's a backprint too. Energetic
doom.
Energetic alternative doom.
Yeah, going back to the pacing thing that you were saying before too, it like kind of what Alex was saying just now. It's like, I think all the riffs, as far as the pacing goes, they were consciously crafted between these two guys to be like at the pace that everybody felt was most impactful, you know. So I think that's probably why the pacing rings so true with you, you know. And I think that's something that you guys did make a conscious effort to in your writing.
Yeah, I would say so.
All right. So now we've talked quite a bit about the world that was. And before we go on, I'm going to ask you the toughest question in most of our interviews is, we want to play a track from the album. Which one and why?
It's usually easier because we generally have only like one member of the band, but this time it has to be between the three of you.
We have to have a consensus.
Hey, if we end up playing three of the songs, we've like kind of played half of the album. We don't want to do that.
I'd throw out the world that was. I don't know. What do you guys think? Don, Mike?
Yeah, I mean, we could really pick like, I think we could probably all agree on any one of them, you know, to some degree, you know. Like Alex would say the world that was. Like I would probably say Self-Schism if I was gonna pick one, like, you know, if I had to pick like one like right off, like right away. Like I think that's the one that I would go with.
This is just purely off of the world that was, or just
or do you want to pick up from the split also that you guys put out? Which one do you want to pick from? Because then
or from the earlier album.
The split, the Four Doors, or the Heart. I really like Harvest of Flesh. I think that was a pretty good one. I was glad that we were able to do that with Revel in Flesh.
Oh wow! Okay,
I can pick that one. I like that. I think that it's. I was going to say that'll be my pick, I guess. I like that one.
See, now it's only two from the album and then one spare song, so it's not the half the album. So you guys are good, right?
Yeah, there you go.
Yeah, I would back. I think Don, you would back Harvest and Flesh too. So.
Oh yeah, definitely.
Yeah, Harvest of Flesh.
I think that was definitely the more like just straightforward death metal kind of like gore lyrics that we ever did. I think that was cool. It was you know, I don't know. I really like the riffing on it. I like from a lyrical point on my own contribution, I thought the lyrics were pretty tongue in cheek, kind of akin to my sense of humor. Anyway, I think that just the production on that, it was done in the same sessions that we did the Four Doors to Death. Something about that production, I think, recording session that we did, I think came out as very heavy. So plus it
I
was
like
cool
the outro to it. Like
yeah.
the drum outro. I like the fact that you say lampshade. You know, so
A fine belt or lampshade.
yeah.
All right, so here it is.
one of the things about your albums I noticed, right, is that there's always an acoustic-based song. So is it now like a signature of sort? You know, something that everyone expects on the album?
I mean, at this point, because Don and Alex are basically the guitar players. I mean, like, they do most of the song craft, most of the riff craft, things like that. Like, I've offered some ideas here and there, but I mostly like them having their own riff dynamic anyway. And this is kind of like, the acoustic stuff is kind of like my way to, I guess, maybe add something, you know, musically to it. So usually, and it's something that I can kind of compose in my house by myself, you know, in sort of solitude, which is kind of like the right mindset for that sort of thing anyway. And I don't know, I don't mind doing it because, yeah, like I said, it's kind of my musical contribution to it without, you know, stepping on too much of the toes as far as the riff writing dynamic. And I don't know, it's something I actually really enjoy playing acoustic guitar. I like it equally as much as I do playing electric. So it's cool for me because any of the other bands I play, and I'm playing electric guitar anyway, so it's different, and it's a way for me to kind of branch out some other influences and things like that. So I like doing it, and as long as those guys are encouraging of it, I'll continue to do it.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's great having, like, you know, because Mike plays guitar too, you know, but like he just does vocals with Temple of Void, you know. So I think it's good that he has, you know, that there is like a third, you know, guitar voice, you know, somewhere on the record, and like the stuff that Mike writes for those pieces are all really, really good. Like I would listen to a whole album of those if Mike ever if you ever did one of those, man, I would totally listen to one of those.
Yeah, and
another offer on the table.
Yeah, people dig them, you know, and it's always, I think, a treat for the rest of Temple of Void because, you know, we hear like he'll play a little snippet on his phone or something like that, you know, and like we don't really know how it's gonna take shape until we're in the studio, and then we're always blown away with it, and it's really it's really cool. So I think just as much as we'll always have Death and we'll always have Doom, we'll always have a Mike Ardody, you know, instrumental.
And I think too, especially with that one on The World That Was, I think again with the placement of the songs and how the album runs, I think that track is like a really good kind of dividing line for like kind of like the way the record kind of shifts. It's kind of like a good, like there's like a line there where it, like, you know, you got Casket of Shame and follows on after that, and Leave Light Behind before that. But that acoustic interlude, I think, kind of sets the tone for like the back end of the album a little bit.
Yeah.
I could agree with that.
Yeah, I agree too. I mean, it acts as a perfect kind of an interlude between two different parts. Okay, so here's a question for the lyricist in the band, and I'm assuming it's Mike, right?
Yep.
Yeah.
Okay. So, what's really happening here? I mean, it all seems to be extremely reflective, personal stuff. Save for the first song, "A Beast Among Us," which is just outright, just straight up traditional death metal kind of territory, right?
Yeah, it's kind of one of those things with the way the album was arranged. Like, A Beast Among Us is kind of, you've got it's essentially kind of a werewolf thing, but it's kind of nondescript. And it kind of works as sort of a sequel to the final track, which was off of Lords of Death, which is Deceiver in the Shadows, which is also sort of this nondescript bestial character. Could it be a vampire? Could it be whatever? And it kind of works into that, and you've got sort of the beast being killed, and that kind of kills, almost figuratively, like metaphorically, that sort of aspect to the album. And then with Self-Schism and everything like that lyrically, it kind of becomes a little more self-reflective, a little more stuff, just personal stuff, combination of like just kind of approaching death in weird ways, or not in like weird ways, but just trying to be somewhat novel with it. kind of approaching it more from like traditional dualities and things like that, and like approaching death as sort of like, I've said it before in other things where it's like it's an equalizer, it's an opening of doors and a closing of chapters, it's a it's ending, it's also rebirth, it's it's the yin to the yang of life, kind of. I mean, it's all an interplaying thing. We've got leave the light behind, which is taking death and sort of putting it into the context of like serving death as sort of your livelihood. So as far as the lyrics, everything up until this point was very rooted in like horror. It was rooted in just like arcane, very just sort of like storytelling kind of stuff. Like this was a chance for me to kind of branch out as a lyricist, because I've written lyrics and stuff for bands before, but it's never really been anything like to the extent or like success level of it not like popularity level of doing Temple of Void. So it's still relatively like not something that it's a learning process. So it's like this was kind of an attempt for me to sort of branch out lyrically as well. So that's why they are a little bit different, and that's why things are kind of placed how they are on the album. And then, when the World That Was track kind of hits, like things are very like existential and whatnot. So I don't know. Hopefully that answered the question.
Yep, it does. It does. Okay. So this is my final question about The World That Was. It's the band's third album, right? Which generally, according to me, is the album that cements a band's sound and gives an idea about what kind of legacy the band is going to leave behind with. If you like historically look at the third album as such, what do you make of this observation with context to The World That Was?
I mean, I'd be happy with that if this was the record that
Yeah.
people. I mean, we like everything that we do, but if I had to introduce someone to Temple of Void, it would be The World That Was. I think it's the record that we're most proud of. I mean, you're proud of the first one because it's your first one. Everyone, is your baby in its own way. But I think this
Would
is.
you view this as your master of puppets?
Yeah, right. Because I really like Kill 'Em All and Ride the Lightning, but it's tricky. But I think about The World That Was that makes it superior on a certain level is I feel like it's the most truest representation of what we maybe set out to do from the get-go. From an atmosphere perspective, I felt like it all came together in a way that there's no going back now. Like the way that we approach the atmosphere in this record is only going to move forward, and it's improved in ways that the other records have lacked. And this is being hypercritical, from an artist's perspective. But yeah, I think it's a distillation. It's an improvement, and it's the one we're most proud of, today. But ask us after album 4. We'll tell you that'll be the one that we're most proud of. It'll be better than album 3.
It'll be the heaviest. Striving to improve with each record release and stuff like that. But I think as far as The World That Was, it kind of goes back to what you were saying. It's the pacing. It's the fact that it is kind of 50-50 in there. It's not too much of one polar side. Another huge thing that didn't really get pointed out, or I want to point out, is there's actual choruses on it, which is not something that we did on previous albums. Because Self-Schism, Leave the Light Behind, Casket of Shame, they all have actually solid defined choruses. So I think that adds, it's the album you show your mom, But I mean, so you've got that, what I mean, where it's, it's got that sort of hook sense to it. So, if you're going to try and get somebody into it and, you want something that's going to kind of define it and going to leave a memorable impact with them, there you go.
That's a beautiful filter, by the way, the album that you show your mom. I'm going to be using that. Thank you for that.
All
right. So here's our final question, and I guess we're wrapping things up the same way we started. What does metal mean to you?
And yes, it's for all of you.
What does metal mean to me? Man. Now
That's
that's
here for another hour trying to figure out.
Yeah, we asked this to Steve Lips Kudlow, and he said, in his words, metal is metal. He said what? Metal was the thing that my parents never allowed me to do,
Yeah.
and this is why I did it.
Such a cool guy.
Well, I guess I don't know. I guess for me, it's something I like. I have an older brother who's he was listening to Slayer and Metallica and stuff like. That's how I got into that kind of music. Initially was that's why I started playing guitar. Like my brother played bass, and I wanted to be like my brother, but I wanted to like play all the cool like guitar solo stuff, and So I guess I don't know. For me, I don't know. I can't really put like a word on it, I guess, but for me, it's something that I've been into for quite a while. It's been constant there. I guess that's how I can describe it for me. It's always kind of been there, and it doesn't really it doesn't let you down,
It never bends.
True.
Heavy metal never bends.
Well, yeah, I want to change my answer and just say what Mike said.
I'm telling you, you guys are coming up with great T-shirt ideas on this.
Heavy metal never bends.
Metal, it never bends.
No, I can't claim that. I don't know, man. Metal for me, escape, I guess. I guess I could just go for music in general. No matter what kind of shit is going on with your life, no matter what's just anything. It just everybody goes through shit every day. Everybody's got you're into metal. I think Rollins said it. Kind of more into punk and stuff, but it's like you like heavy music because you have heavy emotion. And I think that translates perfectly to heavy metal just as much as it does like, hardcore punk or anything else, or even just rock and roll, You have heavy emotions and things like that. I've always found coping. I've always found, a lot of things like that with just listening to music and heavy metal in general, especially metal just being like a limit pushing genre in general. You could do so many things from funeral doom to stuff that on more like the grind and like noisecore there's just a complete spectrum of things that you can do and you can immerse yourself in, and that's always worked for me, and it's always been I wouldn't have found these two dudes to jam with if it wasn't for heavy metal. I wouldn't it's kind of it's a connection, especially for people that are like introverted people in general. And that's my take on it.
Which leaves Alex.
Well, I'm going to riff on what he said and quote Morbid Angel, extreme music for extreme people. So, for me, metal is creation. If I had to say one word, and metal is expression. So, it's a creative expression, and metal is, I'm just going to fill in the blanks with a whole bunch of different words. It's creation, it's expression, and at its best, it's transcendent. There are times on stage when everything comes together, everything is right, and as a musician, it feels like a transcendent moment. And it doesn't happen every show all the time, but when it does, I'm getting like goosebumps just thinking about it. There's nothing greater in life than when you get that kind of transcendent moment, and you stop playing the instrument, and it's just
you can just feel it.
And it's all the vibe, and you don't. That is just the greatest thing in the world. And sometimes you can get that transcendence, and that through the creation process. Like I love writing songs. I love being in the studio. It's just a different kind of transcendence, but I think when everything connects and everything vibes and you write something together, and like Don and I, we just hit the right notes at the right time, and we're like, oh shit, and then it just starts to come forth. that giving birth to something new that didn't exist before, that's Mel, you know.
That was beautiful. All right, Temple of Void. Thank you guys so much for taking some time out and doing this. We know you've got very busy days as such with your jobs, etc. And interviews can be a bit of a strain. I hope you guys had fun with this one. Thank you guys once again for doing what you do. And Don, thank you for your service on the front line. Shout out to Bren and Jason as well. Thanks all of you for making some time out of this.
Yeah, these are good questions. This was fun. Thank you for taking the time out of your day to do this. Really appreciate it.
Yeah,
Awesome.
We definitely do. Thank you.
Yeah, it was a good time, man. Thank you.
All right. So now that we have been doomed once, let's get ready to get doomed again. Next week, we're chatting with a brand new Indian doom or drone project. Peter, what can you tell us about that?
To start off with, from what I've read, it was all conceptualized and recorded during this pandemic period. So very curious to see that. But also, the project is by someone I know for a really long time, and he's a part of the Indian heavy metal act Cryptos, and also the stoner doom act Baversi. So yeah, my good friend Ganesh, aka Jack, glad to have him on the podcast and chat with him all things doom and drone.
Yup, Mega Drone. That's for next week. Till then, tata, bye bye. Stay safe, everyone. Reach out to us. We are at hornsubpod.com.
I'm at Trend Crusher.
I'm at Asmo Annie. We are at Hornsubpod on Twitter. Till the next time, horns up.
Horns up.